Hi. For this revision video, I've been asked to do something on productivity. And what I'm going to talk about is three things. Firstly, what productivity is. Secondly, what are some of the factors that affect it. And thirdly, why we would care. So in terms of what productivity is, essentially, it's a measure. One way of looking at it, a simple paraphrase would be something like efficiency. What we're saying is you've got a certain amount of inputs. So our inputs are generally things like generally factors of production, things like land, labour, capital, and so on. And we've got output. Productivity is high if you have a high level of output compared with your inputs. A common way of measuring this is output per worker, but you can measure it in a variety of ways. You can measure output per machine, output per hour, and so on. But as I say, output per worker is one of the most common measures of productivity. Technically, it's known as labour productivity, but it doesn't matter that much. So, in terms of if we take output per worker, we take labour productivity, and we think about what are some of the things that are likely to affect this. Then you come up with a variety of different factors. On the one hand, you could say there's something to do with the labour itself. So we might be thinking about skills and training, education levels. So if we wanted to improve productivity as a government, we could put more money into the education system. We could attempt to provide firms with incentives to do more training, and so on. I think one of the important things to make clear at this stage is that productivity and production aren't the same thing. So if, for example, as a business, you simply hired some more workers, your production would go up, but there's no reason to suppose that your productivity, your output per worker would rise. So in other words, if at the moment I have 5 people making 50 sandwiches, and then I hire another person, and we now make 55 sandwiches, output per worker is still 5 sandwiches per worker. There's been no improvement in productivity. And indeed, parts of economic theory suggest that as you add more and more workers, actually production will rise, but productivity may fall. It's called the principle of diminishing returns. It's this idea that that workers start to get in one another's way, and so on. So it's important not to confuse those two. And indeed, there is a possibility that an increase in productivity might not increase production at all. Suppose that workers become more productive. So my sandwich makers each become twice as productive. So I used to have 10 workers each who made 5 sandwiches an hour. If they make 10 sandwiches an hour, if there's no more demand, then what might happen is I get rid of them. I can fire 5 of them, still make 50 sandwiches, but now I only need 5 workers. And that's why sometimes workers will be resistant to improvements in productivity within the workplace, because they're worried that they're going to lose their jobs. Anyway, returning to the factors that might affect productivity. On the one hand, what we got is factors affecting the labour themselves, skills and so on. So we talked about providing training. The other might be, say, looking at the equipment that they have. So improvements in the actual machinery and capital equipment that they have. So high levels of investment give workers better equipment to work with, therefore output per worker can be higher. Or innovation and technology, the internet, have been ways in which productivity has been improved. The computer age. So the increasing use of technology, and kind of global interconnections, has allowed a given employee to be more efficient, to get more done in a given period of time, therefore meaning that productivity is higher. And as we've seen in areas such as supermarkets, an improvement in productivity sometimes can result in job losses. So if you think about things like self-checkout machines in supermarkets, the number of customers served per worker is now much higher than it used to be, because we have a smaller number of checkout operators with the same number of customers going through. So this is another example of where technology has actually resulted in job losses. So what does it do? Suppose that productivity is rising, or by contrast, if we're talking about the UK, suppose that productivity isn't that great. Productivity has a number of impacts. So one of the things it's going to do, one of the reasons that businesses care about productivity, is it's likely to have an impact on your unit costs. if productivity is high, you're getting a lot out per worker. Therefore, it's likely that the cost per unit will be lower. So again, if we go back to my sandwich example, if one worker's making 5 sandwiches an hour, then the cost per sandwich is, I don't know, let's suppose we pay them £10 an hour, then the cost is £2 per sandwich. If they make 10 sandwiches per hour, it's still the same £10 per worker, but now the cost of the sandwich is £1 each. So unit costs are going to be reduced, and at the same time, hence helping firms to become more efficient, making them perhaps more competitive on world markets if they're competing there. So one potential advantage of raising productivity is that as a business it makes you more competitive for the economy as a whole. Therefore, that can help to both put downward pressure on inflation because unit costs are being reduced, as well as improve the trade balance for those firms that are involved in the export sector, because they're able to reduce their prices and therefore become more competitive. At the same time, if workers are more productive, that means that with the same set of workers, with the same set of factors of production, the potential of the economy is greater. Potential output is higher. In ADAS terms, aggregate supply is shifting to the right. So improvements in productivity then, in ADAS terms, depending on how you bring it about. But if we adopt better production techniques, for example, then again, if this is real GDP, here's a price level, there's AD, there's AS, here's our current output level and our current price level. So the impact of rising productivity is, firstly, it's going to put some sort of downward pressure here, on this part of the aggregate supply function. That's showing that costs are being reduced. At the same time, it's likely to increase the potential of the economy, because with the same number of workers, we can now produce more stuff than we used to be able to. The maximum potential of the economy, its full employment output, is greater. Therefore, that creates higher levels of GDP, as UK firms are more competitive on world markets and can sell more stuff abroad, and puts downward pressure on inflation, because of improvements in efficiency. So what we're saying then is that increased productivity is probably the key route to higher long-term economic growth. Unless you can suddenly discover large numbers of new workers, large amounts of land, then it's investment in new capital stock, in improving the skills of your workers, in giving them better equipment to work with, that's going to allow potential growth. Obviously, you're not probably the only person that's raising productivity in the world. So whether or not your trade balance is going to improve depends on whether you're raising your productivity faster than everybody else. So that there are a variety of and some of it's going to depend on how much price matters for your goods and services. So if you're selling a lot of stuff where it's quality and service that matter, then again having low price may not matter. But fundamentally, productivity is pretty important. It's something that governments tend to worry about, and this is one of the objectives of supply-side policies: is to try to find ways in which we can improve the productivity of the workforce.